I'm Mia Harper, 27 years old, sitting in my cozy office at Mitchell Publishing in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm an editor shaping stories that light up people's lives. My desk is cluttered with manuscripts, a steaming mug of coffee, and a photo of me with David and Laura Mitchell, the couple who gave me a second chance. Looking at that photo, I'm reminded of how far I've come. From a kid who felt invisible to a woman who's finally found her place. But the road here wasn't easy. Let me take you back to where it all began, to a small Ohio town where I learned what it meant to be the other daughter. Growing up as Mia Carter in a modest split-level house, I was the second daughter of Thomas and Margaret Carter. My dad worked long shifts at a factory, his hands calloused and his dreams buried under years of routine. My mum manned the register at a local department store, always chasing a better image to mask her insecurities. Then there was my sister, Sophie, 3 years older and a supernova of brilliance. By age 2, she was reciting the alphabet. By 3, she was reading picture books. Me? I was just average. I got B's, sometimes A's if I studied hard, but I had no special spark. No gift in sports, no flair for art. I was the kid who blended into the background, unnoticed unless I messed up. What I wanted more than anything was for my parents to see me. I'd spend hours practicing multiplication tables or drawing pictures, hoping for a nod of approval. But their eyes were always on Sophie, their golden child. I remember one spring day in 4th grade, clutching a math test with a bright red 92 circled at the top. It was the highest score in my class, a rare moment of pride. I raced home, my sneakers pounding the sidewalk, and burst into the kitchen. "Mum, Dad, look, I got the best score." My cheeks were flushed, my heart pounding with hope. But Mum barely glanced up from her magazine. "A 92? Sophie was doing algebra at your age, Mia. Don't get too excited." Dad just grunted, his gaze fixed on the TV. That moment stung, a sharp twist in my chest, and I retreated to my room fighting tears. I wasn't enough, not then, not ever. Sophie, though, was different. She never rubbed her brilliance in my face. That same night, she knocked on my door, her hazel eyes soft with guilt. "Mia, I'm proud of you," she said, sitting on my bed. "Being class rep, making friends. You're good at things I could never do." Her words were a lifeline, but they couldn't erase the ache of our parents' dismissal. Sophie was their future, their ticket to pride and status. I was just the extra, the one who didn't measure up. That was the start of understanding my place in the Carter family, or lack thereof. It was a lesson that would shape me, break me, and eventually lead me to rebuild myself. As Sophie moved into a fancy private middle school in 7th grade, our family shifted in ways I couldn't ignore. Her school was all polished hallways and kids with trust funds, and Mom was determined to fit in. She started wearing designer blouses, bought on credit, to mingle with the other parents at Sophie's events. "We can't look like nobodies," she'd say, adjusting her earrings. Meanwhile, Dad threw himself into extra shifts to fund Sophie's tutoring and extracurriculars. Their focus was laser sharp. Sophie was their star, destined for greatness. I was the afterthought, fading into the cracks of our creaky house. My needs were an inconvenience. By 5th grade, my clothes were Sophie's hand-me-downs, faded jeans too short at the ankles, sweaters with frayed cuffs. I'd tug at them in school, hoping no one noticed the holes. Birthdays came and went without fanfare. My 10th was marked by a stale cupcake from the gas station, while Sophie's 13th got a catered party with balloons and a new laptop. I tried to shrug it off, but each slight carved a deeper hollow in my chest. Sophie noticed, though. She'd slip me her old books or sneak me a new pair of socks, whispering, "Pick something you like next time, Mia." Her kindness was a quiet rebellion against our parents' neglect, but it couldn't change my place in the family. One evening, when I was 12, Dad came home buzzing with pride. "Sophie scored second in her national math competition," he announced, holding up a certificate like it was a trophy. Mum beamed, already planning a celebratory dinner at a swanky steakhouse downtown. "You're our pride and joy, Sophie," she said, hugging her. I piped up, "Congrats, Sophie," hoping to share the moment. Dad's smile didn't waver, but his eyes slid past me. "We're heading out to celebrate. Mia, you're staying home." My stomach dropped. "Can't I come?" I asked, my voice small. Mum laughed, sharp and cold. "This is for Sophie. Don't be ridiculous." She pointed to a loaf of bread on the counter, past its sell-by date. "Eat that if you're hungry." I stood frozen as they left, Sophie glancing back with an apologetic frown. The bread tasted like dust, each bite mixing with the salt of my tears. I felt like a ghost in my own home, unseen unless I was in the way. When Sophie returned, she pushed a takeout box toward me, steak, mashed potatoes still warm. "I saved this for you," she said softly. I shoved it away, my hurt spilling over. "I don't want your pity, Sophie." She flinched, but I couldn't stop. The unfairness of it all, her spotlight, my shadows, burned too deep. That night, I lay awake, wondering how long I could keep pretending it didn't matter. The summer I turned 15, everything unraveled. I was in my 3rd year of middle school, scraping by with decent grades and a journal full of half-written stories, when Dad called me to the living room. His face was lit with excitement, a rare sight. "Sophie's been accepted to MIT, he said, his voice practically vibrating. "We're moving to Boston to support her." My heart leapt. Boston sounded like a fresh start, a chance to escape the weight of being the other daughter. "So, I'll find a high school there, right?" I asked, clutching at the hope of being included. Dad's laugh was like a slap. "You? Come with us? Don't be absurd, Mia." Mum didn't even look at me, her eyes fixed on a glossy MIT brochure. "We can't afford your high school. Every penny's going to Sophie's future." My mouth went dry. "What am I supposed to do, then?" I whispered. Mum's voice was flat, final. "We're sending you to a residential facility in Cleveland. It's settled." The word facility hit like a brick. I stared at Sophie, hoping she'd protest, but she just looked down, her hands twisting in her lap. "Pack your bags," Dad said. "Someone's picking you up tomorrow." I stumbled to my room, numb. Sophie followed, her voice shaky. "Mia, I tried to talk them out of it, I swear." But her words felt hollow against the reality crashing over me. My parents were discarding me, choosing Sophie's future over mine. The next morning, a woman with a gentle smile arrived from the Cleveland facility. I packed a single duffel bag, some clothes, my journal, a photo of Sophie and me from when we were kids. As I stepped toward the car, Mum's voice stopped me. "You know, Mia, not having to deal with you is a relief. We're done here." Her words cut deeper than anything before, a final confirmation of my worthlessness. I didn't look back as the car pulled away, but I heard Sophie's voice calling my name, fading into the distance. The drive to Cleveland was a blur. I clutched my journal, my only anchor, as the city's grey skyline loomed. The facility wasn't what I expected. No cold, sterile walls, but a warm building with colourful posters and a staff that greeted me by name. Mrs. Evelyn Reed, the director, took my hand. "You're going to be okay, Mia," she said, her eyes kind but firm. I didn't believe her, not yet. But as I stepped into that new world, a spark of defiance flickered inside me. If my family didn't want me, I'd find a way to want myself. The Cleveland facility wasn't a prison, though I'd braced for one. It was a sprawling house with creaky floors and shared bedrooms, filled with kids like me, cast aside for reasons beyond their control. Mrs. Evelyn Reed, the director, ran the place with a warmth that felt foreign after years of my parents' coldness. She noticed my journal on the first day, its pages worn from late-night scribbles. "You're a writer, Mia?" she asked, her grey eyes curious. I shrugged, embarrassed. "Just thoughts, not stories." She smiled. "Thoughts are where stories start." Life there was structured, but kind. Mornings meant group breakfasts, where I met kids who shared their own jagged stories. A boy whose parents were in jail, a girl who'd run from abuse. Their openness cracked something in me, and I started talking too about Mum's dismissal, Dad's laughter, Sophie's guilt. The other kids listened, not with pity but with understanding. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. I threw myself into school, a local high school where I blended in but didn't stand out. My grades climbed, not because I was Sophie-level brilliant, but because I was hungry to prove I wasn't the failure Mum called me. My journal became my lifeline. I wrote about the ache of abandonment, the small victories of acing a history test, the way Mrs. Reed's encouragement felt like a hug. One night, I penned a story about a girl who built a new family from strangers, her words stitching her wounds. Reading it back, I cried, not from sadness, but from realizing I was starting to believe in myself. Mrs. Reed caught me writing during study hall and suggested I join the school newspaper. "You've got a voice, Mia," she said. "Use it." I did, and seeing my byline in print felt like a quiet triumph. 2 years in, Mrs. Reed called me to her office. My heart raced. Had I done something wrong? But she was smiling. "Mia, I'd like you to meet David and Laura Mitchell," she said, gesturing to a couple in their 50s, their faces kind but nervous. David, a former journalist with laugh lines, spoke first. "We've heard about your drive, your writing. We'd like you to consider joining our family." Laura, her hands clasped tightly, added, "We can't replace what you've lost, but we want to give you a home." Their words hit me like sunlight after a long winter. I didn't trust them yet, but I wanted to. As I nodded, tears blurring my vision, I felt the first stirrings of hope, a chance to rewrite my story. Moving in with David and Laura Mitchell felt like stepping into a life I'd only seen in movies. Their Columbus home was warm, with bookshelves lining the walls, and a kitchen that smelled of fresh bread. David, a former journalist turned publisher, had a booming laugh that filled rooms. Laura, a graphic designer, had a quiet strength, her sketches scattered across the dining table. They couldn't have kids of their own, and when they looked at me, I didn't see pity, just possibility. At 17, I was cautious, waiting for the catch, but their kindness was steady, like a heartbeat. They enrolled me in a private high school, where I caught up on years of missed opportunities. Laura helped me pick out clothes that fit, not hand-me-downs, and David spent evenings asking about my day, actually listening. I'd never had that, parents who cared about my thoughts. When I called them David and Laura, they'd smile and say, "Whenever you're ready, we're Mum and Dad." It took months, but one night, after Laura tucked a blanket around me during a movie, I whispered, "Thanks, Mum." Her eyes welled up, and I knew I'd found something real. The Mitchells supported my dream of writing. David got me into after-school journalism workshops, and Laura taught me design basics to make my stories pop. When college applications came round, they sat with me, poring over options. I landed at a private university in Ohio, majoring in English, with a scholarship they insisted on supplementing. "You're our daughter, Mia," David said when I protested. "We want you to soar." The day my acceptance letter arrived, I hugged them both, sobbing. "You made this possible," I said. Laura wiped her tears. "No, Mia, you did." University was a whirlwind. Late nights studying, writing for the campus paper, finding friends who didn't know the old invisible Mia. I started to see myself differently, not as the Carter family's failure, but as someone with a voice worth hearing. The Mitchells came to every campus event, cheering louder than anyone. Their belief in me was a foundation I hadn't known I needed. By graduation, I wasn't just Mia Carter anymore. I was Mia Harper, legally their daughter, carrying their name and their love. As I walked across the stage, diploma in hand, I glanced at them in the crowd. Their proud smiles were my anchor, proof I was no longer the girl left behind. After college, I joined Mitchell Publishing, the company David and Laura had built from the ground up. It wasn't a handout. I took the entry-level exams like everyone else, sweating through interviews to prove I belonged. My first day, walking into the bustling office with its hum of creativity, felt like coming home. I started as an editorial assistant, reading manuscripts, suggesting edits, and soaking up every lesson. David, now my mentor as well as my dad, saw something in me. "You've got an eye for stories, Mia," he'd say, handing me bigger projects. By 27, I was a senior editor, leading a team and shaping books that made readers feel seen. Work was my proving ground, but it was more than that. It was where I found purpose. Every manuscript I edited felt like a chance to give voice to someone else's truth, the way I'd once longed for mine to be heard. Laura would drop by with coffee, her sketches inspiring cover designs, and we'd talk about books like old friends. At home, dinners were loud with laughter, David telling stories of his journalism days while Laura teased him about his typos. Their faith in me was unwavering, but I carried a quiet vow to make them proud, to repay the love that had saved me. Outside work, I built a life I hadn't dared dream of as a kid. I had friends who became family, a cozy apartment with plants I somehow kept alive, and a journal still filled with stories, some published now under my own byline. But the past lingered, a faint ache. I'd think of Sophie, wondering where she was, and of my biological parents, their cruelty a scar I couldn't fully erase. I'd write about it sometimes, late at night, letting the words carry the weight I no longer wanted to hold. One afternoon, David called me into his office. "Mia, I'm thinking of stepping back someday," he said, his eyes serious but warm. "I want you to consider taking over one day, not because you're our daughter, but because you've earned it." My heart raced. Leading Mitchell Publishing was a responsibility I hadn't imagined, but his trust lit a fire in me. I nodded, determined to prove I could carry that legacy. As I left his office, I felt a shift, a sense that I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something, piece by piece, that was wholly mine. I was 27, locking up the office one evening, when two figures stepped out of the Columbus dusk. "Mia, is that you?" The voice was rough, familiar in a way that made my skin prickle. Thomas and Margaret Carter, my biological parents, stood before me, older, worn, but unmistakable. Dad's face was lined, his grin forced. Mum clutched a dog-eared magazine with my photo on it, a feature about Mitchell Publishing's rising star. "You've done well, kid," Dad said, his tone too warm, like we'd never been strangers. "We always knew you had it in you." My stomach twisted. 10 years had passed since they'd left me at that facility, since Mum's parting shot. Not having to deal with you is a relief. Now they were here, acting like family. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady despite the anger simmering inside. Mum thrust the magazine forward. "You're set to inherit the company, right? We saw it in here, we're just proud is all." Her smile was brittle, her eyes darting. Dad chimed in. "We've had a rough time, Mia. Lost our jobs in Boston, got debts piling up. Sophie, she up and left for Europe, no help at all. But you're our daughter. You'll help us out, won't you?" The audacity hit me like a punch. They discarded me, called me a failure, and now they wanted my success. I clenched my fists, memories flooding back. Expired bread, Sophie's guilty apologies, Mum's cold goodbye. Just then, David and Laura appeared, having come to pick me up for dinner. "Everything okay, Mia?" David asked, his voice calm but protective. Mum's face reddened. "This is a family matter. Stay out of it," she snapped. I took a breath, my heart pounding but clear. "You don't get to call this a family matter," I said, locking eyes with them. "I was adopted, legally and fully, by David and Laura. They're my parents. You're nothing to me now." Mum gasped. "You can't just abandon us. We're your blood." My voice rose, steady and sharp. "You abandoned me first. You said I was a burden, that we'd never see each other again. Well, guess what? I'm done with you now. If you come near me again, I'll call the police." Their faces crumpled, but I felt no pity, only a fierce, freeing clarity. I turned to David and Laura, their presence a shield, and walked away, leaving my past in the shadows where it belonged. Weeks after the confrontation, word trickled back to me through a distant cousin's email. Thomas and Margaret were in a bad way. They'd returned to Ohio after Boston, expecting Sophie to bankroll their dreams, but she'd cut contact, building her own life abroad. Without her support, their savings dwindled, eaten up by debts from Mum's designer clothes and Dad's failed side hustles. They'd gone knocking on relatives' doors, asking for handouts, but found no takers. Nobody wanted to bail out people who'd burned every bridge. Now, Dad was working nights as a security guard, and Mum was bagging groceries at a discount store, living in a run-down apartment on the edge of town. I should have felt something. Anger, sadness, maybe guilt. But all I felt was a strange, cold detachment, like reading about strangers in a newspaper. Part of me, the kid who'd once begged for their approval, wanted to gloat, to rub their failure in their faces. But that urge passed quickly. Their downfall wasn't my victory. It was just the consequence of their choices. I'd spent years carrying their words, failure, burden, like weights around my neck. Now, I was letting them go, not for their sake, but for mine. My life was full, and I didn't have room for their shadows. At Mitchell Publishing, I was leading projects, mentoring new editors, and pitching ideas that got nods from David. Laura and I were planning a book festival, her excitement infectious as we sketched out booths and author panels. I'd started writing again too, not just for work, but for myself. Short stories that captured the ache and hope of starting over. Each word felt like a step further from the girl who'd eaten stale bread alone. One evening, as I watered my apartment's plants, I thought about Sophie. We'd exchanged letters since I'd left the facility, her words always laced with regret for our childhood. I wondered how she was doing in London, whether she'd found the peace I was starting to claim. I didn't hate her, never had. She'd been caught in our parents' orbit too, her brilliance a weight she hadn't asked for. I pulled out my journal and wrote her a note, just a line. "I'm okay, Sophie. Are you?" I didn't know if I'd send it, but it felt right to ask. My story wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine, and I was ready to write the next chapter. A year later, I found myself in London, standing outside a cosy cafe where Sophie had asked to meet. I'd sent that journal note after all, and her reply came fast. A long letter spilling with apologies, updates, and an invitation. "Come visit, Mia. I need to see you." The flight was my first overseas, funded by a bonus from a big project at Mitchell Publishing. As I pushed open the cafe door, my heart thumped, a mix of nerves and hope. Then I saw her. Sophie, 30 now, her hair shorter, her smile brighter than I remembered. "Mia!" she called, rushing over, and we collided in a hug that felt like coming home. We sat with steaming lattes, the cafe buzzing around us, and talked for hours. Sophie was a software engineer at a tech firm, married to a kind-eyed Brit named Tom, who joined us briefly and made me laugh with his terrible puns. She told me about her life, how MIT had been exhilarating but lonely, how she'd fled to London to escape Mom and Dad's expectations. "They wanted me to be their ticket out," she said, her voice low. "I couldn't carry that, Mia. I'm so sorry you paid the price." Her eyes filled and I reached for her hand. "It wasn't your fault," I said, meaning it. "We were kids, caught in their mess." I shared my story, the facility, the Mitchells, my work. Her face lit up when I mentioned my editing projects, prouder than our parents ever were. "You're a storyteller, Mia," she said. "You always were." We laughed about old times, like when she'd sneak me books, and cried over the hard ones, like that night with the stale bread. "We've found our own happiness, haven't we?" I said, my voice thick. Sophie nodded, tears streaming. "Yeah, we have." We hugged again, tighter, two sisters who'd survived the same storm, now standing in the sunlight. As we walked through London streets, arm in arm, I felt whole in a way I hadn't before. Sophie wasn't just my sister, she was proof that love could endure, even through pain. We promised to stay close, no more years apart. Back at my hotel, I stared at the city lights, my heart full. The Mitchells had given me a family, but Sophie gave me a piece of my past I could keep, not as a wound, but as a bridge to who I'd become. Back in Columbus, I settled into my life with a clarity I'd never known. Mitchell Publishing was thriving, and I was at its heart, leading projects that brought new voices to light. David and Laura were more than parents. They were my partners, my cheerleaders, their pride, a steady warmth I carried everywhere. At 27, I was no longer the girl who begged for scraps of love. I'd built a world where I belonged, not because of what I achieved, but because of who I'd become. My journal, once a refuge for pain, now held stories of hope, some published, others just for me. Each page was a promise, to keep growing, to keep telling truths. I thought often of Sophie, now a constant in my life through calls and emails. Our London reunion had healed something in me, a reminder that family isn't just blood, it's the people who see you, who stay. My biological parents were a distant memory, their struggles no longer my burden. I'd heard they were still scraping by, but I felt no pull to help. They'd made their choices, and I'd made mine. Instead, I poured my energy into the Mitchells, planning book launches with Laura, learning the business from David, and dreaming of the day I'd lead their legacy. My future felt wide open, a blank page I was ready to fill. I wanted to write a book, not just for me, but for kids like the old Mia, the ones who feel invisible. I wanted to tell them they're enough, that their stories matter. Every day I worked toward that, fueled by gratitude for the Mitchells' love and Sophie's bond. I wasn't running from my past anymore. I was building on it brick by brick into something beautiful. To everyone who's followed my journey, thank you. You've walked with me through rejection, resilience, and redemption. If my story stirred something in you, share it, talk about it, let it remind you that you're never as alone as you feel. Subscribe to stay with us, where every story is a chance to find your place, to turn pain into purpose. Keep writing your own truth, and I'll meet you on the page.